Alright, so the first thing you'll probably do after you do your pre-use check is to put the settings in the ventilator. To do that, what you want to do is select mode at the top here. It'll break down all your ventilator modes by volume, pressure, and this is the intelligent ventilation mode, ASV, we'll skip, and non-invasive. So we'll start with pressure control, which most of you are familiar with. So pressure control on this ventilator is called PCV+. So I'm going to select it, it's going to highlight it, and then I'm going to confirm to switch to that mode. Currently this ventilator is in standby, so you can put all your settings in before you place it on the patient. Okay. So what you have here is your standard pressure control mode. You got your rate, your eye time, your pressure, driving pressure, your PEEP, and your oxygen concentration. So I'm going to just turn our oxygen concentration down to 21% so it does not ring off low oxygen since I'm not connected. Couple differences between this and the impact is that your P control, which is your driving pressure, is a delta pressure and not a total pressure. So this is not compensated. So your total pressure on this ventilator for a setting of 15 and 5 of PEEP is actually 20. Something to note. Okay. And you notice it kicked me out of the screen, and that's because if you do not make changes within a certain amount of time, it thinks that it's just an accidental touch, and it will flash back to the what its last known settings are. And in this case, it's ASV, since that was what came first when we turned the ventilator on. So it does have a timeout function. Alright, so make sure you remember that your driving pressure is as a delta on this ventilator and not your true total pressure. The other thing you'll notice is that it has a flow trigger. On the impacts, it's a pressure trigger of minus to plus scale. On this, it's a flow trigger scale. So typically we leave it on a default of 5, which is what is defaulted on this machine from the factory, unless you want to change it to otherwise. But what that means is that the patient will have to have a 5 liter per minute negative deflection and flow for the patient to trigger a breath. Okay. Now, if you turn that number down from 5 closer to 0, it makes it more sensitive, and that can cause the machine to auto cycle or auto trigger. If you turn that setting up to the max or towards a higher number, you can lock the patient out from being able to spontaneously trigger. So typically we, in respiratory therapy, leave it on 5. One nice convenience on this ventilator is as you're adjusting your eye time and your rate, you'll notice down here your ITE ratio is calculated for you, so it'll change as you're adjusting your settings. In the More menu, you'll notice a P ramp. We typically leave it at 100%. You have the capability of doing a sigh breath as well. Most clinicians, most RTs are currently not doing a sigh breath. That seems to be a trend that comes and goes. But you do have the capability of doing a sigh breath if you do come across a patient that is getting a side breath from another hospital. So once you get your settings in place that you want, you can go ahead and start the ventilator. To start this machine, all you have to do is hit the start ventilation button. And it powers on. It'll give you 1 minute grace period of silence while it's turning on and getting used to the patient. So that's the alarm sound that you'll hear unless you hit the alarm silence button or fix the issue. Okay. Probably one of the first things you'll want to do after you start the patient on the ventilator is adjust your alarms. So you'll notice you've got flashing lights. It'll be either red or it'll be this yellow-orange color, and also corresponding message on the front of the screen to tell you what alarm it is. Okay, red are your critical alarms. You want to make sure you're addressing them. Yellow are your alarms that it ringed but are not, but may wait a little bit to get fixed. So first thing you want to do is click on the alarm, which is right under the control tab. So these are all the alarms that are applicable to this mode. If it doesn't fit on this one page, you do have a second page of alarms called Limit 2, so just flash over to that. And a feature on this vent is it has the auto adjust button for your alarms. So the auto adjust button, what it does is it automatically adjusts your parameters for your alarms for you based on what the patient is currently doing. And that's the number that's between the alarm scale right now. So if you hit that button, it'll automatically adjust it. Okay. This ventilator is not smart, so you got to make sure you're looking at the alarms after you hit the auto adjust. It will not cap out at a certain pressure. It'll just keep climbing up to basically adjust based on what the patient is currently doing. So you want to make sure it's still appropriate for the patient if you're using the auto adjust function. Over here you'll notice there is a button for buffer. The buffer button is a alarm log. Okay, on the screen itself, on the left hand side, it'll tell you what mode it's in, and then it'll give you 3 main setting controls. You can make setting changes if it's one of these 3 settings that you want straight from this screen. Or you can hit the control tab if it doesn't appear on that screen or you want to see a comprehensive setting menu. If you forgot to put your ideal body weight when you first turn it on, you have the ability to place their height after you start it in the setting control menu. The screen itself, the waveforms and the numbers you're seeing on the screen are customizable. So if you click on the screen, it'll pull up a submenu, and you can pick and choose what you want to be displayed on the screen. So you can decide if you want different waveforms, if you want loops on here, or if you want different values, or if you want it to show trends. You can adjust and customize the screen to display how you want. If you do not feel like you're seeing all the numbers or do not want to mess with customizing the screen, there is a monitoring button down at the very bottom right here, if you click the monitoring button, it gives you 3 pages of data that you can scroll through. This ventilator will not let you do an expiratory hold, so if you are looking for an expiratory hold number, it's in the monitoring tab located on page 3, and it will every once in a while do a plateau pressure for you. The other option of trying to find a plateau pressure is to go back on your screen, and I'm going to change this back to flow. You have the ability to freeze frame your waveforms as well. So by freeze framing, what you're going to do is click this icon at the top left of the waveform. Okay, so it freezes it. Now you can use your cursor to scroll back and forth and find your plateau pressure based on when there's no flow in your pressure. So your pressure right now will show up on the top left, and it also shows you what kind of flow you're getting. So that's another way of doing your plateau pressure as well. Under tools, you do have this tool, which we will not be utilizing, so you can ignore that. Next to it, you have configuration, which is your biomed screen. Okay. Then you have your events, which records everything that has happened with this patient, this current patient, and this will also be available once you turn this ventilator off. You can recover it when you turn it back on as exactly the same events. So if you need to go back and chart and find out when something happens, you can pull it back up again under events. Under systems, it gives you the details, specs of this ventilator. An important thing to find on this page if you're concerned about the battery life. So the battery icon is right here, down at the bottom left. You'll see 1 battery currently, but if you have 2 in there, you'll have 2 battery icons. And what will happen is the battery will start out as a solid green. As it depletes, that green level will start to go down. It will alarm at you as well when you're running low on battery. But if you go to the systems menu, it tells you what percentage of the battery is left. If you have 2 batteries, it'll show each of the battery percentage. So right now we have 86% left on the battery. Hit the X to close the box. And if you're not making any changes, you can ventilate and let it do its work. Let's say you want to make a change to a different mode. To do that, hit the mode button at the very top, and you can do this as it's ventilating, so you do not have to put a patient in standby to make mode changes or any setting changes. So we're going to start with SIMV. So you do have the capability of doing SIMV in volume or pressure. Most people are doing SIMV in pressure, so I'm going to select pressure SIMV, accept it, and these are the basic settings that come up. Okay, just like before, your pressure inspiratory is a delta and not a total pressure. You do have flow trigger, and you do have the ability to sync your INV on and off by checking the box. Under more settings, you do have PRAMP and your ETS and your side control. Typically we leave the PRAMP at the default and your ETS at the default as well. So once you're ready, you can hit confirm, and it seamlessly switches over to the other mode, as you can see at the very top left. Okay. The other thing you'll notice is that you have a red line at the pressure waveform. That is the alarm limit you've set. The bottom line is the limit that this ventilator will start cutting off the breath. Okay, and that's just to prevent patients from overpressuring. So just be aware, if your patient is hitting that line, your ventilator may cycle off to the next breath. All right. I'm going to hit the mode again, and we're going to go through the rest of these modes. Under spontaneous, you have the ability to do pressure support CPAP. So if I hit that button and confirm it, these are your pressure support settings. So same thing as before. That is your delta pressure. Currently it's set at 15. So that would be a PIP of 20. If you want to do straight CPAP, you just turn that down to 0. Confirm my settings, and it switches over. This ventilator is very sensitive, so it will keep up with patients breathing fast, breathing slow, breathing different breath to breath. It's very quick to recognize the difference and to catch up with the patient. So what you'll notice between this and the impact is that patients typically tolerate this ventilator better because there's not a long lag, and they can get that breath quicker than they can on an impact. Okay? Alright, I'm going to go back to modes again. We're going to go under volume ventilation mode. So on here you do have APV CMV and APV SIMV. APV CMV is essentially VC AC on this ventilator. However, you can get it set up so it's close to a PRVC setting by using your alarm limits. The prefix APV denotes having auto flow, which essentially adjusts the flow that's in the circuit, and your rise time. So you do not need to set those if you're using these two modes. So I'm going to start with APV CMV. And these are your settings. So you put in a target tidal volume, and the rest of the settings as you currently do. Okay. Confirming the settings, and then it switches over to that mode. APV SIMV is fairly similar. Instead of adding pressure support, what you're going to be doing is placing a tidal volume. Okay. We're going to skip dual PAP. That's one mode that we do not use hardly at all. It's very rare to see dual PAP, but it's another weaning mode that's kind of between SIMV and pressure support. Alright, we got APRV, which I'll come back to at last. We'll skip ASV, and we'll go down to non-invasive. So you'll notice we have NIV and NIV-ST. NIV is your traditional CPAP BiPAP mode, and you'll notice when we change to it that it's very, very similar, almost identical to the same screen as when you're on spontaneous. The difference is that when you're on spontaneous, what it knows is that you're intubated, versus when you're on NIV non-invasive, it knows you're ventilating with a mask, so it will tolerate a bigger leak. You can use this vent with the regular BiPAP mask. If you use the mask without the hole in the elbow, all your measurements will be accurate. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to NIV. Like I said, the screen looks very, very similar to spontaneous. If you want to turn to straight CPAP or straight EPAP, you can change that to 0, and then you'll just get your straight PEEP. One thing to note that I didn't mention in spontaneous mode is that under apnea, you do have backup and automatic. So you can actually turn the backup apnea setting off, which you should not be doing, and you can also customize the settings you want the ventilator to go to when it goes into backup apnea mode. So if you do not make any changes, it'll automatically default to what the vent thinks should be the backup setting. If you want to manually adjust, unclick that button, and then you can adjust to your desire. Okay. Currently, this is going to be in pressure control when it goes into apnea ventilation. Okay. Now I'm going to go over NIV-ST. NIV-ST is essentially SIMV pressure in non-invasive mode. We're seeing a lot more patients on hospital-grade CPAP and BiPAP machines now using AVAPs, and that is very similar to this NIV-ST, except for in AVAPs, you have a target tidal volume you're trying to achieve. On this machine, NIV-ST, and I'll flip it to it so it doesn't keep going out of the screen. You'll have to find the tidal volume by setting your pressure. So an easy way of doing that is look at the pressure that is set on the hospital BiPAP machine, and then take a look at what the peak pressure is, and kind of start from there to see what kind of tidal volumes you're getting. Otherwise, you should be able to copy all the settings from the hospital AVAPs mode over to your ventilator. For your P max and your P low, those are essentially your pressure limits, which you can place them into your alarm settings. And then otherwise, everything else can be copied over. Your I time, your rate can be copied over to this machine. Alright, we're going to go back and talk a little bit about APRV. So in APRV, now you have the ability to copy one for one the exact same settings from the hospital ventilator. So you'll notice you got your P high, P low, T high, and your T low. So you can copy all those over to this vent. Okay. And this essentially wraps up the ventilator section of this. To put this ventilator on standby, you want to hit that power button, and you'll have a standby menu that'll come up. Yeah, double confirm by activating the standby. So it will not just go into standby accidentally or turn off if you hit the power button. To turn this machine off, what you're going to do is get it into the standby page, which is this page or the home page, and then hit the power button for 3 seconds, and then it'll shut off.